In collaboration with the philosopher Isabelle Stangers, Prigogine also has studied the philosophical dimension of his discoveries, showing how these discoveries alter our view of the world and our place in it. The most important of his several books in this area is entitled Order Out of Chaos, co-authored with Stangers. The English language edition includes an introduction by the futurologist Alvin Toffler, who says,
"The Prigoginian paradigm is the next revolution in science."
Prigogine believes that mainstream physics is the weak link of science, and that physics is the equivalent of clay feet for the other disciplines that depend on it, including chemistry, biology, the social sciences, and others. According to Prigogine, the fundamental problem is that physicists, at least since the time of Newton, have believed that the laws of nature are fundamentally timeless and universal. Prigogine describes how this belief has shown us a silent world, deadening our ability to be closer to nature and to better understand it.
Science initiated a successful dialogue with nature. On the other hand, the first outcome of this dialogue was the discovery of a silent world. This is a paradox of classical science. It revealed to men a dead, passive nature, a nature that behaves as an automaton, which once programmed continues to follow the rules inscribed in the program. In this sense, the dialogue with nature isolated man from nature, instead of bringing him closer to it. A triumph of human reason turned into a sad truth. It seemed that science debased everything it touched.
In practice, classical physical laws generally have been thought to be independent of the direction of time. As the physicists say, the laws are theoretically reversible. They would be just as valid if time were to run backward. Prigogine says this point of view leads to a false simplicity. He compares the basic physical laws to simple bricks. Each may be interesting, but the real majesty is in the full complexity of a building, or in the complete system of nature.
What are the assumptions of classical science? Generally, those centering around the basic conviction that at some level the world is simple and is governed by time-reversible fundamental laws. Today this appears as an excessive simplification. We may compare it to reducing buildings to piles of bricks. Yet out of the same bricks, we may construct a factory, a palace, or a cathedral. It is on the level of the building as a whole that we apprehend it as a creature of time, as a product of a culture, a society, a style.
While we can see the people who design and build a brick building, Prigogine says that scientific inquiries do not reveal nature's designer.
But there is an additional and obvious problem, that since there is no one to build nature, we must give to its very bricks, that is, to its microscopic activity, a description that accounts for this building process.
Only one law of traditional physics is not time reversible. That is, only one law does not work if time runs backwards. This is the second law of thermodynamics, also known as the law of increasing entropy. Entropy refers to disorder or randomness, and the second law says that the universe generally evolves toward a state of greater disorder. The law was first formulated by Ludwig Boltzmann in the mid-19th century, and it establishes what's called the arrow of time. In other words, time always flows in the direction of increasing entropy or disorder. Scientists have long recognized that there's a problem in reconciling the second law of thermodynamics with the living world. This is the issue that concerns Prigogine.
The famous law of increase of entropy describes the world as evolving from order to disorder. Still, biological or social evolution shows us the complex emerging from the simple. How is this possible? How can structure arise from disorder?
Physicists often do not take the second law quite as seriously as they do the other laws of physics. To these physicists, the second law expresses not so much something about the way the universe really is, but rather something about human ignorance. For instance, it's practically impossible to gather enough data about very complex systems such as gases and their uncountable trillions of molecules. If we can't have enough data, then our ignorance is permanent, and disorder also appears to be permanent and growing. Of course, ignorance is not an objective property of the things we're observing. It's a description of our state of mind or perception about those things. In this sense, the second law reflects the state of our knowledge, and it is seen as having a subjective element. This fudge factor permits scientists to hold on to some cherished notions, such as the reversibility of time. Prigogine suggests that scientists have adopted this point of view because they don't want to give up the possibility that physical processes could be reversed if scientists could simply learn enough about how to make it happen.
Why have so many scientists accepted so readily the subjective interpretation of irreversibility? Perhaps part of its attraction lies in the fact that the irreversible increase of entropy was at first associated with imperfect manipulation, with our lack of control over operations that are ideally reversible.
The average person on the street knows that time runs in one direction. Ordinary experience tells us that. But for physicists, the ability to imagine time running backward is essential to understanding the laws of classical physics. Chemists, and especially biologists and social scientists, find it hard to accept the physicist's notion that time may be reversible. One of their classic problems asks whether the chicken precedes the egg or vice versa. Obviously, this problem can't be solved by reversing the aging of the chicken until the eggshell reassembles itself around the chick. Except perhaps to a physicist, time obviously seems to run in one irreversible direction. The subjective interpretation of the second law, the idea that the law expresses our lack of perfect knowledge, implies that any explanation depending on increasing entropy really depends on our own ignorance. But Prigogine and Stongers point out that life's emerging complexity and organization require time to flow in one direction only. The fact that each of us came into being and continues to grow older shows that irreversible time is a fact, not an illusion or a product of ignorance.
The extent to which phenomena of organization originating in irreversibility play a role in biology makes it impossible to consider them as simple illusions due to our ignorance. Are we ourselves living creatures capable of observing and manipulating mere fictions produced by our imperfect senses? Is the distinction between life and death an illusion?